Hi, how you doing and welcome back to the video. On the channel, what we have for you today is our Game Week 3 wildcard team. If I was wildcarding in this game week, this is the team I would be going to. And some of you might be seriously considering using the wildcard. Maybe FPL's not got off to the best start that you wanted and you want to make a lot of changes. If that's the case, hopefully this video helps you out. If you are new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. The support has been awesome so far this season and we are closing in on 200 subscribers. So if you can help with that, it would be really appreciated. And on a side note, if you do subscribe, you'll be notified in a few days when I talk about how my own team did in this game week, where we did triple captain Haaland. So if you want to stay in contact with all of that, you know what to do. Let's take a look at the team. So as we get the team on the board, we're going to look at the goalkeepers at the start, as we always do. And we've gone for Raya in goal. Now, for me, he's just the best keeper in FPL. I know he's a little bit more expensive than a lot of the other goalkeepers, but I do think he is worth the price. Now, Arsenal have some tough fixtures coming up, but they can keep clean sheets against the best teams in the league. And, you know, you pay that extra money for that likelihood. Now, a lot of goalkeepers at the moment, they're a little bit hit and miss, not as many clean sheets knocking about. If you want to guarantee a few more clean sheet points and some save points as well, I would go for Raya. Now, if you are going to be doing that, you do need to have a 4 million goalkeeper on your bench. You're kind of, having Raya as your first choice no matter what. He is a very much like a set and forget goalkeeper. So you don't have to worry about subbing him in and out. But you don't want to be spending more than 9.5 million on your combined goalkeepers. That is the top end maximum price you would want to be spending. The main thing about your sub goalkeeper, because you're not going to play him, it doesn't really matter who it is as long as he's 4 million. But what you don't want to do is get in a goalkeeper in this position who's going to block you off from getting 3 players from a team that you want. So for instance, I wouldn't go for like a cheap Man City player because there's a chance I want triple Man City outfield players at some point in the season. You're very unlikely to want triple Brentford players at any point in the season. So that's why I've gone for Valdemarson here. I think is a good example of the point we're trying to get across. So in defence, I've actually gone for a double Arsenal defence here. Now, like we say, they've got some tough fixtures coming up. It doesn't mean they can't keep clean sheets there, but I think it's important to acknowledge that you're wildcarding. You're not looking to get in players for the short term. You can obviously make short-term transfers after you've wildcarded, but in order to get the most value from your wildcard, you also want to be able to use your players for the medium to long term. So I think getting a double Arsenal defence is a good option. They are the best defence in the league. And yeah, they got a little bit lucky against Aston Villa yesterday, but all teams are going to have good luck and bad luck, and a good team invariably has better luck than most. So I don't really want to do an Arsenal double up in attack in this team because I think there's just a few different options and they're less likely to get 90 minutes as a whole. I think in the defence, even if you wanted to take out Saliba, you wanted to bring in a substitute defender for the odd game week, I actually don't mind bringing in players like Davis, Robinson and Faes for a single game in a game week. That's what your bench is for. And if they score 1 or 2 points, I think that's okay. Like, that's just your standard sort of score for a lot of defenders. As a lot of you'll be finding out with your teams right now, defenders don't always get you that many points. Now, you could also swap him to Gvardiol. You could also swap Trent to Gvardiol as well if you didn't want to spend the extra money on Trent. Now, we are recording this video before Sunday's games, so if anyone has gotten injured, unfortunately, there are some replacements that we can talk about as well. We are going to release a video about that later in the week, just for different budget options for different players. So stay tuned for that. But for me, Trent, although he's the most expensive defender in FPL, he's great value. Like, when you consider comparing him to midfielders, say, of a similar price, you're looking at those price midfielders and they're kind of your budget midfielders. They're usually the ones that you're trying to sort of save a bit of money on so you can get in the more expensive players. And for me, Trent represents so much more better value compared to those players. At the same price point, he has the ability to get clean sheet points, but because he's so good from an attacking point of view, he also has the option to get points on both sides of the pitch, the defensive and the attacking side. So I would absolutely get him in. And like I say, if it doesn't work out, he's so easy to move off because you can go to any other defender in FPL that you want to get in your team. So into the midfield we go, and there's a couple of risky picks in here, or it might be perceived to be risky, but we'll talk about why I think they're still good picks. Now, I think what we've learned in FPL so far this season is that big hitters matter. Salah was the most, best point scorer in Game Week 1. Haaland, as it stands, is the best point scorer in Game Week 2. You do kind of need those big hitting players. Now, of course, you're going to need risky picks at the mid or cheap prices as well in order to get them in. But you don't want to sort of spread your funds around your midfield so you've got 5 players that are worth 6.5 or 7 million in value, because the reason that they're at that price is because they're less consistent than the more expensive players. That's why Salah is the most expensive midfielder, because he scores the most points consistently and he's also capable of getting those big hauls. And I think having an expensive player, premium player in your team is also good for captaincy as well, because they can get those explosive returns. And without having him in, you have to ask yourself, well, who are you going to captain? And you have to have someone like Salah in who you're comfortable captaining more often than not. Now, we have supplemented that with Smith Rowe and Rodgers. So Aston Villa, whilst they've gotten off to a bit of a shaky start so far this season, they don't look terrible. And Rodgers has actually played 90 minutes in both games so far. Villa's games coming up are Leicester, Everton, Wolves and Ipswich in the next 4. So if you've got a player at 5 million who is playing 90 minutes for pretty much a top 4 team, I think that's a great value pick. That pick is less risky than most other 5 million midfielders. So I wouldn't have a problem getting him in and starting him most weeks if he's going to be getting 90 minutes. The same for Smith Rowe. Like, Fulham are okay. Do I expect Smith Rowe to return every week? No, but he's 5.5 million, so I don't mind him supplementing the rest of the players in this team. And as we've seen already, he is capable of an attacking return. What we don't know with Smith Rowe is whether he's going to get rotated in or out of his lineup, whether he's going to be able to sustain it for a full season. But like I say, if he gets injured, then you transfer him out. Don't be thinking, oh, what if he gets injured? What if he gets injured? Because you could be thinking, what if for the whole season? And then you get to the end of the season, you've not had him in, and he's got a load of attacking returns. If you feel like he's going to get not played one game week, bring in someone like Robinson. I wouldn't have a problem in this next game week bringing in Robinson for Smith Rowe and just benching Smith Rowe, because they're from the same team. They've got a great fixture, and Robinson is still a great FPL player. Now, I'm sticking with Saka. Saka will probably be in every wildcard team we do this season, just because he is so consistent in the points for the full season. Like, he's done it time and time again every year. And we talked about how Arsenal attackers, they can get subbed in and out. You've got your Martinelli, Trossard sort of combination on one side. You've got your Havertz and Gabriel Jesus combination up front. Saka is Saka, and he's probably going to play 90 minutes no matter what. He was unlucky to not get 2 assists yesterday. I think one of his passes for the first goal kind of deflected away to Trossard. So he is capable of getting those consistent returns, and he is also considered a premium midfielder as well to go alongside Salah, someone you wouldn't mind captaining in your team. Now, rounding out the midfield, I've gone for Foden, and I do think Foden is a good option in FPL. Whether it's a little bit too early to get him in your wildcard team for Game Week 3, I can completely understand that. But it will save you a transfer in getting him in the future. You don't know how your team's going to go. There can be injuries coming up. Like we say, someone like Smith Rowe, you might want to transfer out. Someone like Foden, you can get into your team. And you are looking for those differential picks as well. Like, if you're wildcarding now, you've either planned it from the beginning or your team's not how you want it to be. The way you gain rank on other players in FPL is by going for those players that you think are going to score points before everyone else does, and that's how you catch the rank. So for me, Foden is a player who is going to want to, you're going to want to get in your team at some point in the season. And Man City's fixtures, they do look okay, and Man City are Man City, so Foden's not going to be a bit part player. It's not like I'm telling you to get in, a player that we think either is a big risk. We know what we're getting with Foden. So I would be really considering getting him in right now, but I do understand why you might want to go for another FPL midfielder who's cheaper and then use a transfer to get Foden in once you've seen him play some regular minutes. Another reason for getting Foden in right now is because this team doesn't have Haaland in, so you do kind of semi-cover that Haaland risk. Now, not having Haaland, people might be thinking, oh my days, what are you doing? He's just scored a hat-trick against Ipswich. But I would have fully expected Haaland to get a hat-trick against Ipswich. Like, that's not a shock to me. He scores goals all the time. And him not being in this team, if I was wildcarding without Haaland, I would acknowledge that he's probably going to keep scoring. You would expect that. But can we recreate these points elsewhere with a bit more of a well-rounded team and use the money we save not getting Haaland in to spread out across the team? So I think you can. I think someone like Haaland is a great pick, but he comes at a cost. And having someone like Isak and Watkins up front, I think can nullify that impact as well. Now, Isak, like we say, we're doing this video before Sunday's fixtures, so we'll see how he's done today. There are other options, but unless he's injured, I really would get him in your team. I think he's just the main focal point for Newcastle. Now, Newcastle's fixtures aren't great, which is why we've just gone for one Newcastle player. But if they score, you would expect Isak to be involved more often than not. And I think at that price point, he is fantastic value. Now, Watkins, you might be saying, why is he in the team? He's not scored. He's looking a bit off it. But that is just a bit of rustiness at the start of the season. You look at those chances he had yesterday, and a fully sharp Watkins is finishing those chances. And he actually didn't score in his first 3 game weeks last season. Did get some assists in that time, but he didn't score until game week 4. And I actually had him in my team at that point. And I think at one point he dropped down 0.3 million. But then in a few game weeks' time or later on in the season, he'd actually risen up 1.3 million at one point in the season. So obviously that's not going to happen all the time, but I wouldn't be worried if you own him. I definitely wouldn't sell him because, like we said with Rodgers, Villa play Leicester, Everton, Wolves and Ipswich in the next 4. So even though he's not looking great at the moment, we do say like good fixtures creates good form, and then good form makes bad fixtures good. So you need those fixtures in your sort of future for Watkins so he can get a couple of goals, get his feet going, and then he will get consistent returns. He was the best scoring, in terms of attacking returns, striker last season. So he's obviously a good player. He just needs a bit of time. And I think at the end of those 4 fixtures, there'll be a lot more people who'll be considering Watkins. And like we said with Foden, if you're looking to wildcard, you need to be looking at the future. You don't want to be chasing points of players that have already happened. Say like a Welbeck or something. Like Welbeck is probably a good option. I'm not saying it's a bad option. But how many goals do you think he's going to score in a season? Like how many goals has he scored in recent seasons? He's not as consistent as some of the other players. Watkins is someone that you can get ahead of other players in your mini leagues and get him in. So shout out to Fantasy Football Hub. They rated this team at 93%. And I think as long as your teams are in the low to mid 90s, I think that's absolutely fine. There's so many variables that the data can't take into account. Like that Watkins miss yesterday, you can't quantify that in the data sometimes. That's the beauty of football, that it is a bit of an eye test and a bit of a gut feel sometimes. But I think as long as you're in the low 90s, the data is kind of supporting your team as much as you would need it to. The value is 100 million. Now, I would actually say the value of this team, even though everyone can afford it at the moment in FPL, I would say some of this value is going to be going down. I think players like Foden and Watkins, I could see dropping in price before the next deadline. So I would bear that in mind. Depends on how other players, maybe Trent might be close to rising up in price, maybe Salah could as well. So I would just keep an eye on the price points and maybe the transfers in and out, depending on when in this game week you want a wild card, because you could save yourself, a couple of 0.1 millions for the future if you just wait a couple of days as well. So the strengths we've talked about is good differentials. Now, I think the differentials we've got, they're not super risky. I think we've talked about them in enough depth. And there is big upside as well. Players like Watkins and Foden, Salah, Saka, Trent, they can get you big returns that will help you climb the ranks as well. The weaknesses for me is, we've talked about there being no Haaland. I do think this team covers that in a few different ways. And there are a few risks that might not pay off. But we did also talk about, if you didn't want Foden right now, get him in a couple of game weeks when you think he's got the minutes. So that is the team. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are there any players that I've missed out? Are there any players that you think I should absolutely, should have stayed away from in this team? And are you wildcarding? Let us know what you think. And remember, if it's not gone the start that you want it to, don't panic. There's a difference between being panicky and being thought out and being quick with your transfers. And there's also, you don't want to be too stubborn. If you've got a player in, you think, oh, I really wanted that player, I believe in that player, but it's not happening. You can always just take them out and get them in a few game weeks as well. But it is just a game, so don't worry about it. There's so long to go. There's like 36 game weeks still to go. Such a huge amount of time. Don't worry if it's not gone how you wanted it to in the first place. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Like I say, subscribe to keep track with our videos moving forward. All the support is really appreciated, and I will see you in the next one.